baby!
There are a lot of kids that say they work hard. You know, as a coach, you come across a lot of players that say they'll do anything and that they really want to win and they'll do whatever it takes. But then you meet players that actually do it without being told, without being asked. They do it on their own. They do it because they love it. And they do it because deep down inside, there's a fire that burns. There's a desire to be great. There's a passion that is so powerful and so strong that when you harness it, anything is possible.
I'm Ian Ferris, co-owner of E&G Baseball Academy and the head baseball coach at Santa Fe High School. I first met Scott in 2015. He tried out as an 8th grader for Santa Fe High baseball. I remember my very first impression of Scott was he was one of those guys that wasn't physically mature at all. You know, short, didn't really have a lot of mobility, wouldn't be able to move too well, couldn't really, touch his toes.
God dang it.
I'm George Stellos. I'm co-owner of E&G Baseball Academy. I just remember him being the smallest kid, and he wasn't very fast and couldn't throw. Definitely an outcast of what the kids were hanging out with at the time. They didn't hang out with Scott very much.
So I started playing about my 5th grade year. I was really heavier set, and I was kind of I think I weighed 150 at 5 foot. I was short, heavier set, maybe even smaller. And I actually hit a lot of home runs. So I was literally throwing 30 miles an hour, and you can just kind of time it up. And I had this huge leg kick. I have a quick pitch that MLB channel has all the highlights, and I watch in the morning, at night, before I go to bed. Typically, just everything I can get in. I watch all the games. I have the Giants games recorded all the time. When it first kind of started, I was sitting on TV and there's nothing to watch. And I saw the Little League World Series, and I was all, oh, I could do that, because I had no other sport to play. I could not do that, but I thought I could. And I didn't know how much went into it, but then I was like, yeah, I could do that and go pro. That was kind of my thought there. I played for Little League, and then Taylor Gann kind of asked me to play for WBC, more competitive. Basically, WBC all this time, I was all, I have time, I could go pro if I really tried. But when I hit high school, it was kind of the revelation of yeah, this is a different story. It's a lot more competitive. I was maybe college. That was kind of my goal. I thought I was just getting able to play college baseball.
High school baseball is a wake-up call for almost all players that make it there. The jump from 12, 13, and 14U talent to that of an average high school player is astronomical. Players face off against others that can be up to 4 years older than them. The field jumps from a measly 200-foot fence all the way up to a full-size field. It can be a daunting task for any young player and often weeds out those that can't stack up. I remember there was definitely a lot of people that didn't really think he was any good. Our high school program, the coaching staff at the time, nobody really thought, Scott was anything other than maybe a kid that can just add our numbers, make kids or have more kids out there on the field, help us fill out our roster. The very first day of outfield and infield practice, I was hitting him fly balls and ground balls.
Yeah, I remember trying to teach him ground balls and fly balls and the footwork of outfield and playing defense.
I was really concerned when I was hitting him to Scott because I thought for a second that, it might hurt him, it might hit him in the face or something. Most of the coaches thought he was a great kid and loved him and loved him, having him around. But I'm not really sure too many people really thought that he could, contribute to varsity baseball at really any time. The best way to describe Scott at that time was, he probably couldn't hit the ball out of the infield, and he definitely couldn't throw it much farther.
I do remember him being very attentive and very smart kid, and you could tell that he had a different kind of energy that he brought to the table. He really wanted something. You couldn't tell what it was at the time, but he really wanted something.
I do remember a conversation with the head JV coach at the time, talking about, we just needed to get more numbers for the program. It was kind of a growing program. And we were trying to just keep as many kids as possible to keep our numbers up, keep the interest up. And so, we discussed Scott as kind of one of those players that, to be honest, if he was on a team in Albuquerque, he probably wouldn't make the cut. And I think that he even ended up telling me that he was really surprised that he actually made the cut initially, and that his family was surprised as well.
So when we did the cuts that Friday, I was like, there's no way I make this team. I was like, to be honest, I'm not making it. I've worked really hard, but I'm just not talented. And then I made it, and I was like, oh, I was so pumped. And at home, I went and I told my mom, and even she was like, you made it? Like, she looked at me, she didn't even think, and she was kind of surprised, and she was so excited. And the very next day of practice, I was so excited going in, and I walk in, and everybody's talking in the dugout, like all the players and stuff, and they're all like talking, how'd that little kid Scott make it? And they were like, even so pissed, man, how'd he make it? How'd he make the team? He doesn't deserve it.
I really knew Scott was going to be a good player pretty much the day I met him.
The very first time I saw Scott, that would be the first time that I thought he could be something special.
Myself and George knew what it was like to, be kind of one of the smaller kids and overlooked, and not necessarily the kid that gets to get all the opportunities.
It was just his size, mostly, because I seen him and me, or me and him, either way.
He loved the game, you could tell. He knew all about the players in the MLB. He knew all about the colleges. He really knew a lot, and he always really loved it, you could tell.
I'm going to let y'all know, you're at home right now and you play high school baseball in New Mexico. We're about to eat, son. We're eating, baby.
So in August 2015, after I had met Scottie in the spring there, myself and George Delos decided to open up this baseball academy. We were wondering if we could develop players at a younger age to allow them to get to us at a more prepared level for the high school. So that's initially how it started. And Scott was one of those early kids that really took advantage of it. January 2015, we got our first facility, and it was a small little garage-like facility. It wasn't very big. There wasn't a whole lot of space. It was literally one cage. You had a little bit areas for weights where we had our squat rack, but there was really nothing. It was about 25, 30 feet. That year we had our first summer teams with E&G. So Scott was one of the kids that signed up to play.
I would make him do lunges and jumping lunges and squats and jumping squats, and we had a bench, so we did bench all the time, and then you get faster and more explosive, and we did a lot of med ball throws, and we swung the bat more than anybody that I could ever think of in the summertime. They had to get maybe 300 to 500 swings a day because they were there so long. I do remember Scottie was one of the kids that rode his bike every day. He rode like 14 miles from El Dorado to visit this cage that was subpar. It was you wouldn't come to see it. You know what I mean?
I remember one time, me and George were, having practices at the cage and at Santa Fe High, and we were noticing that, Scottie would ride his bike a lot. And I remember seeing him on his bike pretty much every practice. I ended up asking him because somebody had told me he lived in El Dorado, and I was like, wow, if he really lives in El Dorado, that's pretty crazy he's riding his bike. And sure enough, he said, yeah, I live in El Dorado, coach. I mean, I don't really have anything to do out there. If I stay out there, my parents are gone all day, I'll just kind of sit around and do nothing. So why not just go and, ride my bike to town and hang out and work out? So that's exactly what he did, man. He made the E&G first cages, our first facility. That was his second home.
So me and Dominic Crawford, that was our Nico Fuentes, we'd always go there every day after just to play wiffle ball or something. One day my mom was like, why can't I drive you? Let's find a way. My dad was out of town, my brother was out of town. I was like, all right, well, I got a bike, and I just started riding in from El Dorado, and it just kind of became a habit. And I talked to my dad, and he told me it was about 12 miles in and 12 miles back. Pretty much every day, yeah, just riding in. And then sometimes we'd have, if we had like a team practice on Saturdays, we would be at Santa Fe High, so we'd just run that trail, but pretty much the same amount of distance to Santa Fe High.
I remember speaking with the coaching staff of varsity and letting them know, Scottie's kind of dedicating himself. He had been coming to the summer program with E&G all summer, and he'd been riding his bike about 30 miles, or I think it was 25 miles total, round trip. So it was definitely an incredible thing that he was doing. So I let the varsity coaches know that. They thought he was a great kid. They thought he did everything right, but they just didn't really see a whole lot of value in him on varsity. So as a freshman, he was back on JV.
When you get to high school, I had plenty of coaches just being like, yeah, you're not good enough. I was an assistant coach who actually told me to come try out. He was just kind of like trying to get everybody. It was specific to me. And the head coach, there's plenty of coaches who are just like, you're never going to make it. You're not going to start on this varsity team. You'll never play. I constantly had that.
The thing that was really cool is by the end of his freshman year, he was actually able to play in some games, start a couple games for varsity because they needed some players that could play defense. And he really had, at that time, by his freshman year, developed himself into a pretty solid defender from the year before. "80% of the players on any given team will do the bare minimum required, just enough to get by. 10% of players struggle to meet the very basic needs and requirements of the team. They are constantly late, skipping practices, skipping meetings, and will put their own needs ahead of the team. These players require constant attention from coaches and likely won't change no matter what the consequences are. Then there are the 10% that will do anything and everything the team asks of them. They go above and beyond the call of duty, and ideally, drag some of those 80%ers with them. At the very top, there is the rare player that eats, sleeps, and breathes the game. An obsessive desire to play and improve constantly. The type of player that won't let any obstacle stand in their way. We call those players the 1%ers. Scottie, he's a 1%er.
I think the hardest thing about our process that we do is it's a long process, right? I think that a lot of people want quick fixes. It just doesn't work that way. It's not possible. It's way too complex. The motion of throwing and hitting and catching, those motor skills are so complicated that you can't boil it down to one or two things, and you can't fix it in a day or two. It's going to take days and days and weeks and years piling on top of each other to get there. And Scott shows what can happen when that's the case. As is common with a lot of amateur players, you just have trouble sequencing and moving in the right order to be efficient. We don't care how you look when you move, we care about how efficient it is. Luckily through our technology, we're able to actually measure that, be able to measure progress, and kind of give each guy a plan.
was like a flower in blossom. And that's exactly what it was like. It was beautiful. He got big and he got strong and he filled out, and we told him that he would get bigger and he would get stronger and he would get faster and he'd be able to hit farther and throw harder and everything like that. But physically, he worked for everything he had.
I kind of have a long driveway. It's not long, but it's probably about the size of the cage, just uphill, like completely. And so I just try and run about 10 sprints a day at least. And then just lifting weights, trying to do the best, biking as much as I can. But basically just lifting every day.
It's really exciting to see, when a guy has a plan and attacks that plan and updates that plan and keeps checking his progress. It's amazing how much they can get better, how much anybody can get better at anything if you do that. And Scottie really is a perfect example of that.
He would show up to the cage early and be the first one there and the last one to leave. And he would always try to up his weights, always going up in weights. He was always seeing if he could bench a little bit more, or squat a little bit more, or do something a little bit harder or more. And I think that's where his physical progression really started to catch fire.
I just want to thank everyone for coming out today. I want to specifically thank my coaches, Ian Ferris and George Ferris of the E&G Baseball Academy, for giving me the opportunity to play for the team at Santa Fe High School. I want to thank Coach Dallas Correa for now giving me the opportunity to play for his program at Hawaii Pacific University. I want to thank my teammates for being my brothers for the last 5 years, for helping me push me to become a better player. I want to thank my mom, my father, and my brother, my girlfriend, for their constant support.
He settled on a place called Hawaii Pacific University. I think that obviously it being in Hawaii caught his eye, but it's a very high academic school, and they're also a very, very good program. Matter of fact, Coach Correa has got 7 guys drafted the last 2 years out of that program. So it shows that it's a good opportunity to play baseball at a high level and also get your academics at a high level. We're very fortunate that Coach Correa was excited and interested in Scott, and actually got him to fly out there to Hawaii, check out the campus, and kind of see everything about it and go on a visit. And I think after that he was sold. And then he was able to come back here to Santa Fe and sign a scholarship in front of all of his family and friends, and kind of signifying the journey that he's gone through.